Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matthew Forte. I'm the president of Accelerate. We're Canada's zero-emission vehicle industrial alliance. We work with partners across the entire supply chain, from critical mineral mining and battery materials through to components and obviously vehicle assembly, really to help build Canada's zero-emission vehicle industry so that this can be a national champion industry that contributes to our GDP and the growth of our country for generations to come. We're really happy to have partnered today with Canadian manufacturers and exporters on this discussion, this webinar conversation that really is going to seek to advance the conversation on building the zero-emission vehicle supply chain and connecting innovative businesses and to discuss challenges and opportunities as the industry transitions towards zero-emission mobility. I'd like to briefly introduce our moderator, Vincent Caron, who is the Director of Policy and Ontario Government Relations at the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. CME is a member-driven association that directly represents more than 2,500 leading companies and accounts for an estimated 82% of manufacturing output in the country and 90% of our country's exports. Vincent oversees advocacy and the development of an advanced manufacturing strategy for the province here in Ontario. He also advises on national member engagement and policy development on matters related to Canada's growing EV supply chain. Just a housekeeping item. We will have time for questions at the end from webinar participants. Would ask that you please enter your questions in the Q&A using the Q&A button, and we will get to those throughout the course of the conversation and obviously tackle questions at the end. That's the end of me, so I'm going to hand things over to Vincent and look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. It's a pleasure being here today. There's a lot of excitement right now around Canada's growing electric vehicle supply chain, which we all want to be as end-to-end as possible. And so, today we're going to talk about really completing that cycle. So recent investments have occurred in some of our key manufacturing centers, Stellantis and Nexstar in Windsor, where Dave is speaking to us today, but Brampton as well, Volkswagen and PowerCo in St. Thomas, London area. In Quebec, we have Nordvolt and Saint-Basile-le-Grand and the Sautre of Montreal and GM in Bécancour. So there's a lot of activity from an OEM perspective. But zooming out, there's other activities we don't often talk about. There's still gaps in our supply chain. We have, for example, we have motor core manufacturing in Oakville and Brantford. We have no domestic production of electrical steel. So we're not done with economic development to support an end-to-end EV supply chain. Beyond the OEMs, the tier one suppliers, there are thousands of companies, over 500,000 people working in manufacturing sectors that have a connection to auto. Primary metals, metal fabrication, plastics, not to mention all the machinery manufacturers, the tool and die makers, the automation, the electronics that comes in support. I encounter these businesses frequently. Many of them are small and medium businesses, entrepreneurs who put savings on the line to build something. And there's a bit of skepticism out there. Many wonder, how do I plug in? How do I fully use that generational economic opportunity that EVs represent? There's more support needed. This is what we're here to do today. We're the support network for all these businesses out there who wonder what's next. So that's technology. We did the CME did a technology adoption survey last year. Only 40% of manufacturers telling us or I say only 40% telling us they've yet to start just beginning their digital transformation process. So that's actually a lot of manufacturers. Only 34% of Canadian manufacturers reported using automation or autonomous robots. 29% said they're using AI, and it was in the single digits who told us they use it a lot. So really, it's often not integrated to operations. SMEs struggle more. Canada has more of them. 9 out of 10 manufacturers are small companies. They play a key role in supply chains. We know it in the parts, tier 2 and tier 3 parts. That's important. It's really big presence of smaller businesses. And there's a really strong people component. 1/3 of manufacturers told us there's a shortage of skilled workers, and that's one of the biggest barriers to technology adoption. That happens as a generation of manufacturers is retiring. 18,000 workers per year in our estimation, as we mentioned in our latest report, Manufacturing Ontario's Future. So we need to explore the connection between technology, innovation, and the manufacturing workforce. So we have, I would say, the best panel I've seen at least recently of experts to help us navigate all the changes and the opportunity ahead of us. So just to dive right into it, and let's follow the James Bond movie principle. We want to see some of the explosions at the beginning. So let's go right to the core of it, which is the supply chain gaps, really. So I'd like to begin with a round of advice for economic development leaders and policymakers. From your point of view, what areas of the ZEV supply chain still need to be developed? And I would ask maybe Warren to get us started on that.
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you, Matt, and the team at ZEV Canada for affording me this opportunity to connect with your audience. A little bit of background. I'm Director of Industry Innovation here at the Vector Institute. We're a leading AI research institute based here in Toronto. I lead our mobility and industrial innovation portfolio. So to build on what Vincent was saying, we have seen some very foundational and large-scale investments from the likes of the Nextars, from PowerCos, from Northvolt, and they're setting up an opportunity for growth into zero-emission vehicles and batteries that's going to span the next few decades. And so, much like the rest of the automotive and the parts ecosystem within Canada that was a part of the traditional automotive sector, the automotive community is very connected in the fabric of society here as well. And so when we talk about what are some of the things that are missing, I say we can talk about how we're going to be expanding these existing relationships and the greater connective tissue in the technology ecosystem that Canada also is very robust in to spur additional growth here and address these perceived gaps. We have companies like Magna and Linamar that are partners at Vector, and they themselves are making large-scale investments in support of ZEVs, Magna in Brampton, Linamar in Welland. And so they are participating and investing in the future as well. It's not just in the manufacturing side, and they're partnering with us here at Vector. And we're exploring ways that we can apply AI to increase and improve productivity, as well as expanding on conversations with respect to, especially when it comes to EVs, automotive and vehicles are becoming more and more technology platforms on wheels. And so there's a broader tech ecosystem that's empowering the intelligence and the value creation within the vehicles themselves. And so having this conversation today, it's great to be able to explore these opportunities with our friends, Jared and David, and help inform and learn from your audience.
Thank you, Warren. I mean, David, staying on the theme of automation, what are we missing?
Okay, well, thanks, Vincent. My name is Dave Fortin. I'm the chair of Automate Canada, which is an association of automation companies, primarily in Ontario at the moment, but we're expanding. I'm also the president of Data Realm, which is a controls integration company, and we integrate automation systems in factories, primarily places like Ford, Stellantis, Honda, people like that. So in terms of automation, what are we missing? Well, probably a lot in the case of battery electric vehicles. In fact, we're missing the entire, I wouldn't say the entire, but almost the entire automation business at the moment that goes into at least batteries. We'll just start with batteries, is not resident in Canada. there are, related industries like pulp and paper that do similar applications with, when it comes to, calendaring and cutting and rolling and certain things like that have correlation. And there's also parts of the chemical industry in Canada, like in Sarnia, where there's similarities to, the early part of the cell manufacturing. When it comes to the later parts of say battery electric vehicles, such as making modules and trays, that's not as complicated. It's more of a discrete assembly process, which we have lots of capability in. I honestly can't speak to you about the perhaps motor manufacturing, electric motors. I know we probably have a few, but I'm not too aware of that particular business, so I can't speak on that. And then, all the other parts are, making a car isn't going to change the, after we have powertrain. It's not going to change much to the point where we need more automation people. But yeah, I would say from an automation point of view, it's really the battery cell part that we're really missing. And perhaps, if you want to get into other areas like expertise in solid state or lithium extraction purification, I'm sure there's, some room to improve there as well.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot that we don't know in terms of what each successive wave of investment is going to bring in terms of, and then what is not here in terms of capability. And when we see new mineral production, that mineral refining capability, so that we don't have to ship the materials back to China so that they come back refined, right? So
especially lithium.
yeah, exactly. Jared, what are your thoughts on that? Or yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So from our perspective, we have a little bit of a different perspective because we're part of that tier 2, tier 3 supply chain.
Yeah.
So we're a manufacturer of wiring harnesses and wiring systems. My family's been in the manufacturing business for 40 years, and only in the last 8 years or so did we get into the EV space. Prior to that, we were manufacturing wiring systems for industrial products, aerospace, defense, some more traditional markets. And then we kind of saw this coming a little bit and started to dip our toes in the water and figure out how we can, play in that space as well. And then fast forward 8 years later, we're the leader in that space in terms of industrial and commercial EVs, staying away from the passenger side and going towards those more niche segments that often lack support too, because people don't want to do the lower volumes and go through that, crawl through the mud per se with the OEMs. And that's what we do. So I think our perspective on just the, overall, say I'll comment on use of technology and how we're going to affect all of this in Canada. And I'm speaking, on behalf of Canada, but also on behalf of Quebec. I'm here in Quebec and a strong advocate for the Quebec market in this space. But I think it all comes down to a kind of a personal mission of mine is this, make manufacturing sexy again. And really what that all, I was talking with my marketing team about this too. And they said, oh, we love that. You gotta say that because it really encompasses everything. So it encompasses companies using AI in their business, figuring out how to do that, take that step. It's inevitable. It's the future. It's coming in like the next year or two. It's not something that's 10 years away. And that's also how we came about in creating our AI software that we use in the business. But in doing that, what happened is it leapfrogged into a worker effect. And using the technology in our business impacted our ability to attract workers, retain workers of a younger generation who are very interested in how we're using technology in an old school manufacturing business. So it people, right? And I really struggle in that aspect. And the last thing is, just the experience of take yourself out of your traditional spaces and try to get into EV in some way. We talk to many companies, plastics manufacturers, metal fabricators, people making bearings and all kinds of different things that have always played in maybe in the traditional segments, automotive, HVAC, flying, whatever it might have been. They make amazing products. And trying to help them figure out how they can do something related to EV. If it's in the battery pack, in the vehicle, in the charger, in the infrastructure side, we need help everywhere. So wherever you choose to start is a good starting point.
And so, yeah, just to stay on that, because as you said, you were not in that space 8 years ago. And you know, I'd like to maybe you to tell me about what is really different about this space for you that that you had to maybe pivot a little bit, and then get to a place where you're talking to us about, like, you're an example of a successful transition. So maybe if you can give us a bit of the specifics of what does it really take in that space?
You know, I think a lot of manufacturers, and again, the tier 2, tier 3, we are very cautious about investment, right? We're not going to go and just, you know, like bigger companies, they'll assemble a team and they'll spend, you know, thousands, millions of dollars trying to figure out how they're going to do all of this. We don't have that luxury. But the good news is in Canada, we have a lot of programs that help to fund these opportunities, federal programs and provincial programs. We didn't know about any of them starting 8 years ago, and we had to find them. But we knew that in order for us to take that first step, we had to find the funds to help us do it, because we had our day-to-day business that had to run, you know, over here, where we're trying to fund something over here. So we found those opportunities, and I really encourage companies to do that. Reach out to some of these people on the panel as well. They have these contacts. We have these contacts. We're happy to share them, because most people don't even know that they're there. And the program names change like every 3 to 6 months. The government likes to keep us on our toes. So sometimes it's hard to, that's number one. And, you know, I think people will underestimate how much trying to get into the EV space will excite their business. Excite their business from a perspective of their employees will get excited. Now, whether you're going in it in a big way or even a small way, even the small way will start to create that momentum of excitement. And then it'll create excitement with your customer base. It'll create excitement in kind of market at large when you start to talk about what you're trying to do in that space. And it could be something very, very small. And what we underestimated how much that would affect all the aspects of our business. When we started to talk about it and share and create that excitement, it trickled through every aspect of our business, and it actually helped auxiliary sectors, defense, aero, medical, and all the other segments where we were already supplying products.
Yeah, and that excitement, I think we all share it, and we want to see more companies really share in it. But David, I'd go with you for just to think through now. You know, under the layer of excitement, there's also problems with navigating the automation component. You know, become more productive and be able to plug in that supply chain. So, you know, and we know that companies in Canada have had a tougher time navigating automation. We just a fact when we look at our rate of adoption versus the United States. So, so can you maybe give us from the perspective of the companies that specialize in the, you know, the tools and the machines and that automate vehicles, but also like any manufacturing process, how can they position themselves to do that transition from your perspective? And maybe if you can give us like some of the things that you have been involved in to try to help businesses.
Sure. I guess we'll start with what we've been involved with. So through my company, DataRealm, we have done some work in a few different battery facilities. One, for example, I don't know if I can mention them, but one in Michigan with one of our major customers. It's like a research facility, and we did a lot of the data collection, IoT type application within the facility. And in doing so, you know, doing the data collection in IoT doesn't really teach you perhaps a whole lot about making a battery cell. But then what happens is you get involved in programming the PLC, and then, oh, they need some help because maybe a company didn't have one of their employees left and they need some help finishing programming. Next thing you know, you've learned a little bit about this type of application and programming it and how the process works. And that's kind of an example of how you get started. You get involved in some facility any way you can, in any fashion, and eventually, you know, you get your feet wet. You start to feel more confident, and then from there, if you do a good job, they'll ask you for more work, because everybody needs help these days, because you know, the level skill level is, as you mentioned earlier, and talent is a problem. And so once you've got some kind of talent going on, they're going to bring you in. And another example would be an affiliated company of mine. You know, there was some issues with some CNC cutting at one of the plants here locally, and they needed some help. So they brought one of my business partners in. He taught them how to program some of the machinery. And then while that's going on, they're asking him if they can, you know, maybe help them with this and help them with that and make a fixture for this. And next thing you know, again, you start slow and you get your feet wet, and next thing you know, become an expert in one area, and you just grow from there. So that's, you know, a couple examples of how you start small and build your, you know, you build your talent, right? And
Yeah.
they keep you in. They just say, hey, you know what you're doing? Come on in. We need more help, right?
And that's it. It gets one thing leads to another, right? In the plant,
Absolutely.
when a process is often continuous, everything connects to each other. So you fix a problem here, maybe there's another one.
Absolutely. So that's you know, it's a grassroots way, right?
Yeah.
Other companies I know have done a lot of work in the battery module assembly. So battery module assembly is assembling battery cells into larger, you know, almost like a car battery size components, and you put a bunch of them together into a vehicle, right? And it's called a tray, or there's different names for it. So assembling modules are less complicated because they are discrete assemblies, right? So you're assembling 15 or 20 or however many cells into a module, and you're putting in a box basically. And there's other things that are important, but you know, that's there. I know a few companies around here in the machine in this business, in the automation business, that are doing that. But that's, you know, that's another example of getting involved. But that's a little more of instead of being a totally different thing, you're just kind of moving laterally into something that's you already kind of know, right?
Yeah. You
in
mentioned.
terms of,
Oh no,
sorry.
keep going. No, go for it.
It gets a little more complicated when you're getting into some of the more chemical processes, because they are not, what would you call it? They're very secretive about their processes and about how things are done. And so that's a much more difficult area to get involved in.
Yeah. That's more of a specialized skill set for sure, capability. Warren, I'd like to hear you on, you know, reflecting on the challenges we're hearing from Dave and Jared. Like how can Canadian industry leverage innovation to really get at those robust partnerships? And like Dave was mentioning, you know, data collection, IoT, the Internet of Things, right? We all want these pieces of machinery in our plants to be connected, to talk to each other, to feed us lots of data. In reality, we also have legacy equipment, so there's challenges. But like, what's the approach to really bring innovation in the sector?
Well, if you look at some of the drivers, obviously the transition from internal combustion to zero emission is happening, but it's not just happening over a protracted period of time. It's happening in a very quick and short time frame. And so with all of these changes that are happening, decisions are having to be made at more rapid intervals, and it's not exactly clear where that final destination may be going when you're making these decisions. And it's not exactly clear where the exact starting points may be for all of it. So when you're looking at a digital transformation, it becomes much more important to have a strong, flexible, and adaptive process that ultimately leads to a very robust and quality product. And so by focusing on the process now, you also have to think about the different people and the different elements within the company that help you with making those decisions. You start with the data, and automotive is a very connected supply chain, upstream and downstream.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at it from an AI space or a digital space, the supply chain also includes a data value chain. And so some of that information is fed from your upstream suppliers. You then process it and transform it, and then it gets fed to your downstream customers. So figure out exactly where you are and where your ultimate data value is within that chain that is yours specifically, and ensure that those elements, including the people, it definitely always starts with the people. You have the skill sets and the leadership within who understand how to articulate and assign a value to that data in it. Then you're going to make sure that you are keeping that up to speed and as clear and as protected as possible too. You got to think not just from a site security standpoint of the physical facilities and the people within the place, but also the cybersecurity on that. So start with innovation in and around how you not only automate, but what your digital transformation looks like. Bring in the leadership within your company or employ it in some way through partners. I mean, Jared's story is great. They brought it inside. And again, it started with the people. When he's talking about excitement, it's not computers and robots running into each other that are all excited. It's the people within it that are going to be leading the innovation charge.
Yeah.
And so this is part of where you also have to start identifying new skill sets and new ways to value that skill within your business. Because in manufacturing environment, it's all about how can you add to the effectiveness of the actual product that comes in, and that's what your contribution to it. But if you can start speaking about their contribution to the overall value of the process itself, which will then in turn lead to value in the product, then you're going to start evaluating how you bring specific people in and their contribution to the company. And so that builds out a bigger dynamic. And so that's where innovation can happen. And then like Jared talked about, and like David said, you can find specific partners to help either finance and fund your own internal innovation or partner with, because you say, we really need to focus on this. This is not core to our business, but we need partners to come in. And like David said, you then find your way. So are you going to be a partner? Are you going to be an organization that fosters innovation? Or are you going to be one of those points that creates the connective tissue that can help, the thing is used a lot, but the rising tide lifting all the boats. And so you can follow an example like David's group. You can follow the examples like what Jared's doing. You can partner with groups like Vector, who we have 31 enterprise partners that are pan-industry. We have over 400 startups that we work with. We work in partnership with the federal government and the province with respect to what are the things that are missing from the talent development side, from the training side, and we work with industries on how we can co-develop these things together. So it's not just Vector. There are others obviously in Quebec. We have a very talented team at Mila. On the West Coast, and in Alberta, we have Amy, very much integrated into the manufacturing ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think you're right to talk about process as really a foundation, right? Like that's really what drives this transition. Is if you try to just tack on technology on a process that is not really thought through, you get garbage in, garbage out, right? And so that's where at CME we've worked with a lot of businesses on the full lean journey, on really have a strong understanding of the process. Where's the waste in your process? Where are the weaknesses in it? As really the stepping stone to then automating successfully, right? And so there's across the country have resourcing to help companies with the lean journey. But Jared, I wanted to hear you a little bit more on process, because we'll get back to people. I think that's a really big area to explore. But on the process side and developing those technology solution, Wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experience, given that, you, as you said, you were not in the system in the supply chain 8 years ago, and now you're thinking about maybe selling some of your solutions that you developed, right? So maybe tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. And I think it nicely goes in with exactly what the guys are saying with Warren and David, is that for us, really, no offense to, I guess, governments and larger organizations or just kind of tech guys, usually they overcomplicate things.
Right.
Start to talk about all these topics of things we could do in our businesses, right? IoT, connect this, put AI in, install this new machine, let's go automation, let's put robots, right?
Mm.
And the first thing that again, I'll talk from the small, medium business owners looked and they say, this is way too complicated. It's going to cost me way too much money. And I'm not going to see a tangible benefit in my business. Maybe years later, maybe if I'm lucky. So we run for the hills. So in our business, what we figured out is there's really two rules. The first rule, you have to pick one very specific, simple way to introduce some kind of piece of technology. Not 6, not 4, 1. Very, very simple one. Okay. And the second rule is it has to give tangible, calculatable value to the business. You need to see a cost saving. You need to see an increase in business. Direct related. You start there. If you achieve those things, now the technology snowball will begin. Because everyone in the business will start to believe, the leadership believes, and now you can go talk to the people that want to talk about those 6 other topics and things you can go do.
Yeah.
Very simplistically. So what we did as a business is we started to explore different pieces of technology, looking at those 6 or 7 ideas until we honed in on one. And our one that we chose was quality control, quality inspection. Every manufacturer has to do it. It's there. It's a cost of your process. It's unavoidable. Some products have lower cost of quality. Some have higher, depending on the type of product. So we found quality. We said, okay, that's where we're going to focus. And then we chose AI. And we said, okay, we're going to use AI to do this. And we had governing rules. We said it has to be simple. It cannot add time to our manufacturing process. If it does, the customers won't pay. So forget it. It has to be easy for our employees. We can't have a whole team working on technology adoption and retraining hundreds of people, thousands of people on how to use this solution. That is not the goal of technology, and especially not the goal of AI. So developed our own in-house AI system. Took about 2-3 years to do it. In about a month's time, we're actually bringing it and launching it commercially as a SaaS product, offering it to other manufacturers. We use it in 5 of our plants today on our own products. So it's demonstratable. We bring people in, show them how it works. And we achieved that objective. We brought in a piece of tech. It doesn't add time. It increases quality. It increases employee engagement. Our training time of our staff went down drastically. Our motivation of our production workers went up drastically. We're attracting talent. So when companies complain they can't find skilled talent, we say, well, you need to look at yourself first, because that's what we did. And we developed new training systems and training programs and bring in AI and do these things to excite the younger generation. You're not going to find Jim, the 5, 10, or 20-year-old, years of experience in a specific sector. It doesn't exist. What's that? The definition of, I think it's insanity, right? You're repeating the same thing, expecting a different result.
Yeah.
Change. That's it.
If you allow me to build on what Jared is saying now, where did it start? It started at a leadership position. Jared is not the manager or a team leader. He's the president. Right. So it started with a leadership decision. And as simple as it sounds, he started with some overarching governance or, plan as how this is going to be implemented. So the first rule of the governance model was it had to be simple. So these are part of the ways that you can create an innovation culture as well. It starts with leadership. when it comes to AI, you definitely have to start thinking about a governance model in it, like what type of data you're going to be contributing to it, what type of outside sources. And then as you start building, you can then start figuring out what kind of specific use cases you want to apply. And do you want to work on them in-house? And so Jared made the conscious decision that we want to bring it in-house because we have talent and we have a plan as to how we're going to do it. But sometimes you don't. And
Just
you know,
we
and
had students, we had our internal team, we had a couple of external people, and most of it was funded through government programs. We didn't pay for very much. Very, very important. This is, again, the small guys, we don't have tens, hundreds of thousands, millions to spend on these things.
No.
But the money's there.
And that's a really key thing, because obviously there's also a very strong self-reliance theme. I find a lot of companies I encounter say, well, I want to do it. I don't want to worry about applications. I don't want to fill forms, right? But we are also in a competitive economy where everywhere around the world, governments are heavily supporting businesses to get into that space. So we can't have tools and not use them, right? So there's a lot of programs, especially right now, to support SMEs. So one that I'd like to point out, because it was the Ontario budget yesterday, in Ontario at least, there is a support for 10% of equipment and real estate expansions for businesses in any manufacturing, really. So you're getting into a development of new solutions. There's funding that can come from that. There's federal government, and that's available across the country, really working on the clean manufacturing investment tax credit, 30%, which is not a small chunk, for especially for the electric vehicle space and minerals and mineral processing and things like that, right? So that is more targeted help. So if you are in a clean technology manufacturing space. So again, incentives are really important. And so it's important to look at them, to use the resources at your disposal from industry associations, from Vector, from Automate Canada, from all, and obviously Accelerate, who's there to help you. So it's important to use those resources, and don't be shy about it, and ask and ask the clarifications when you don't really see the way that you plug into it. So we're gonna keep going, and maybe I'd like to hear you all on workforce. So we mentioned the need to upskill workers. Where are the needs really most pressing? Can each of you maybe give me one concrete action manufacturers can take to do some progress? Because we want to bring the problems, but also want to bring the solutions at the same time. And as well, I think so. I'm told that we also the Q&A there was a Q&A function in this, but we're just going to make sure that we see if we can bring it back up in case people have questions. So if you haven't seen us acknowledge your questions, we are working on that. So David, did you want to talk to us a little bit from a skills perspective and like things that you're seeing there?
Sure. Yeah, so on one hand, the skill gap isn't, I personally don't think it's great. I mean, in certain areas it is, but in general, if you're going to use AI, you're going to need to know AI, whether it's batteries or whether it's engines or whether it's whatever it is, making, popsicle sticks. A lot of the skill set isn't a whole lot different. When it does, it is different when it comes to the actual battery cell, the active material or the cathode anode material, and certain, obviously some of the testing components within battery manufacturing. Charging is another one that is something different. But, the skill set itself is not insurmountable, and it's not something, I don't think we can easily overcome. But, there is training required. It's not going to be just something that's just going to happen. So like what we did is we, in Automate Canada, we're doing battery cell manufacturing training where we're teaching other companies of the individual steps and how you make a battery cell so that they can at least understand where, where they are, where the gap is and what they need to do to get to the next step. And I know at least from in Windsor here, the local university and colleges are, adding programs for electric vehicle maintenance and charging and that kind of thing to bridge some of those gaps. That's been my experience up to this point.
Jared, you were talking about those young workers, getting them excited. So, I mean, it appears that this part of the manufacturing supply chain is particularly good to engage those younger workers, those technology workers that maybe didn't see a career in manufacturing before, would instead go to Silicon Valley. Like, what are needs that you are seeing as you were kind of getting into new areas?
Yeah, we kind of saw this, even starting with maybe 5-6 years ago, before COVID, before all of that happened. The thing, we tell, and I talk to a lot of companies about this, and they come and they complain to me how they can't find their workers. And the first thing I say is stop complaining. Look at yourself first.
Yeah.
Stop posting that you need someone with 3 to 5 years experience in this particular field.
Yeah,
And
that's a good one.
Yeah. Those days are over. But we've seen in our business that the labor pool is significant. There is not a shortage of labor, in our opinion, and what we've seen. The shortage is looking for the needle in a haystack. And that needle has grown over the last 5, 6, 7 years to include a lot of other positions that weren't necessarily needles before. But now they're needles. So instead, we invest in the business instead. The business has to take the onus on itself to invest in different ways to train and excite their employees. As an example of what we did, instead of people coming in and reading a training manual and working with John, the 10-year experienced worker, for the next 3 weeks, which was a typical training process in a lot of companies, we said, okay, throw that out. We're going to build a digital training system. We're going to use our system that we have. We're going to make it like YouTube, and we're going to have interactive videos and stuff like TikTok, and we're going to, flavor our our training instructions differently. And then we're going to move them around between different trainers, and we're going to show them the AI software, and we're going to have them use that on their first day when they come in with us, and build a strategy around that to excite these people who, I think I've hired one person in the last 5 years that knew anything about a wire or wire harness before stepping foot in the building. We train them, we invest in them, and they get up to speed very quickly because we invested in the business, and then the business invests in them. And that is the powerful part that we've seen. And that's what companies and manufacturers have to realize. Stop complaining. You have the ability to do something about it yourselves, and it's not expensive, and it doesn't need a team of 30. We're happy to talk to people too about that. I get it all the time. And we're happy to show, obviously, non-competing businesses what we've done. We're very strong advocates about powering manufacturing, bringing this sexy back to manufacturing in Canada and Quebec. It is absolutely doable.
Warren, what are your thoughts? Because we always think of that the tech talent is expensive. It's people who don't want to work in manufacturing. Like, what's your experience, and what is Vector doing to help companies?
Well, that was part of Vector's original mandate when they were formed in 2017, is to increase Canada's research capacity in the AI field, as well as building out a pipeline of talent. And that has reached every possible metric and measure since. We've grown, Vector itself has grown from 12 researchers to a group almost 800. Our talent pipeline is 1,400 master's and PhD students. every year. And one of the great successes is over 90% of that talent and research capacity stays in Canada. So the one thing that I'm hoping that people get from this conversation is when you're looking at innovation, you can be inspired and be confident by working within Canada itself and working with partners. And to address your specific question with regards to skills and talent, there's two different ways you have to look at it. When you want to onboard talent, and Jared is a great example, you have to have an understanding at the leadership level as to what you're trying to do. So in AI in particular, the majority of leaders at present probably don't have a background or pedigree in AI. So it's going to be important that you inform yourself on what you have to do to understand, manage, and govern AI within your company. And then you also have to be able to understand what success would look like when deploying an AI initiative within your company. So from Vector standpoint, we have programs that do that. We work on projects, we work on thought leadership, we work on specific applications where you're understanding managing AI risk, you're understanding what you need to protect your information from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so it's those high-level decision makers that also need to be trained, if you will, on the opportunities and the challenges in AI. And then when it comes to the skill sets, it really depends on what you can do internally with the data leaders. Everything in AI is data driven. So who do you have internally that has an understanding of your data that can potentially be upskilled into these roles? And then there's a vast pipeline of specialists that are coming out that are looking for these opportunities, that are curious, that are creative, that want to explore. And that's one thing that if you just go to any one of these facilities, you'll see it. They have ways to foster and inspire your curiosity. It's just in automotive, if it's not an OEM with a brand name that an average person can relate to, it's not an offense, but they're not going to know a pro EV. They're going to know a technology type of a company because that's what's going to be in their face all the time. And that is what looks sexy. But if you go and you sit down with the companies and the leaders and you start getting inspired by the people who've built businesses that have spanned generations. Jared, you talked, yours is 40 years old. David is a founder. So they're building businesses that have spanned generations. And they're Canadian enterprises. And so when you want to inspire the next generation of talent, they can see it from a Canadian perspective. And so it's on us too. And Jared said it right. We have to be the ones to look inside ourselves first and say, what can we present? But the important thing here is for those that are aspiring to do it, you can be inspired by the fact that there is a robust talent pool and a robust history in even AI. The three godfathers of AI happen to be based here in Canada. Jeffrey Hinton, who's our chief scientific advisor, whose deep learning and neural networks research has what spawned into all of these applications in Gen AI. And pretty much every single one of those researchers and students that have come up with him have been leaders in this field globally. And we can talk for days about the leaders that we have here, but that's not the point. The point is the collective group here, you can work with all of these partners and build Canadian platforms with Canadians.
So we could talk for days, but we have 10 minutes. So we're entering the rapid fire round here. We've got some questions. First from Jay Logan, what opportunities are there for EV mobility for EV scooters in Canada for manufacturing and assembly? So maybe just to broaden this a little bit, because we always talk about passenger vehicles, other types of vehicles where you see opportunities, and whoever wants to take that.
I'll start. I think that's probably an easier place to get involved than with automotive, just because automotive has such large established supply chains that have to get vetted, and you have to have vendor codes. To get into something a little more niche would certainly be easier.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about how you market that, but from a manufacturing point of view or finding people to help you, I think that'd be certainly an easier way to start than right into the large automotive companies.
Yeah, I think we only work in the industrial commercial segment, so everything non-passenger vehicle. We see everything from trucks and buses and energy storage systems and hybrid plane applications and all kinds of things are being electrified. Scooters, I would say there is an ecosystem to look at manufacturing the components of the scooter, doing the final assembly of the scooter. There's lots of contract manufacturers that you can look at in Canada that can help you with that. The one caution I would say is if you don't have a differentiated product, a very niche product, if you're going at a commodity scooter, EV scooter kind of thing, don't even try because you're going to get destroyed by the Asian competitors. You're never going to be able to compete. So there has to be something different. So that's what we've seen. The successes in different vehicle types or watercrafts or whatever it might be, they had a very differentiated offering that was not competing with the commoditized product. Stay away from that. So if you could do that, then you have a good chance with Canadian manufacturing.
Yeah, no, that's a great advice. So we also have a question on the opportunities. So we talked about the opportunities, but what are the threats that we are seeing out there of Canadian businesses really being successful in the EV supply chain? Warren, any thoughts on that?
Well, I will leave it to the automotive leaders specifically in this field to talk about what's happening in terms of the supply chain. But one thing for certain, if you're waiting around for somebody to come with some magic pill or something that's going to allow you to find your way in, that's not going to happen. Sitting around and waiting is not, and trying to say, oh, I'm going to espouse to be a fast follower, especially in AI, you lose before you start. So one of the things that I encourage is you put a premium and a priority on innovation. And if AI is something that you're interested in, that you move into it quickly and get to a place where you can accelerate your understanding and experimentation. And then when it comes to growth and that, it's a broader type of discussion with many different stakeholders, but you yourself as a company, don't wait around for somebody to come in and say, we want to do. You have to actually be very much proactive in this space. And the one thing that's important to understand too, is this is probably the best time to be proactive because they're looking more to the supply chain for answers. And they also don't know what questions could be asked. So if you come to them with solutions that they didn't even know, there's an opportunity now to monetize that. Whereas before, you weren't getting paid for innovation. Now, if you don't, you're going to be discounted against everything too. So innovation is going to actually increase a premium, but you have to be able to demonstrate that you're doing something that's innovative as opposed to something that's iterative or incremental.
Yeah, that seems to be a theme today, is really like start with yourself, look at what you can do, pick a small thing where you can really be effective and show some values. I think that's great advice. And, obviously governments want all of us to get into this. So there's great incentives out there, but you got to go out and learn more about them and then try something, right? Dave, any no regret actions that you advise manufacturers to get into?
Well, I just did want to touch on the last point though, and because there's no shortage of brain power and talent in Canada, by absolutely no shortage whatsoever. It's getting that getting from the talent and the ideas and the concepts to the scaling into production and sales. We seem to fall down a lot, right? As Canadians, we can invent a lot of things and we can create a lot of products, and it's just getting from that to the actual larger scale is where we seem to continually have an issue. Not everybody, obviously, but in general,
Mhm.
Canadians have a problem getting from, the small to the large, or we sell out too soon, or we sell, whatever it is, we're just having as a country, a problem with that, right? So the no regrets part, I would say is take the chance, take the risk, because, if you don't want regrets, then you got to do that. Otherwise, you will regret it. That's how I always felt with my own business. I've never regretted, taking a risk and trying stuff. But if I didn't, then I would regret it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Look, I'll throw one in there. Look at your carbon footprint. If you want to be in the EV supply chain today, all the OEMs are looking at how much are you going to emit. Like you see where Volkswagen and Northvolt are going. There's a big emphasis on life cycle emissions from companies for themselves, but also the companies they purchase from. So that there's also that requirement, and really we have to think about how do we get to that end-to-end, clean manufacturing supply chain where we can really use that as a competitive advantage over other jurisdictions where maybe costs are lower, but also the grid is not as clean, and you can really use this to your advantage. Jared, any parting thoughts here?
Yeah, I'll add one last thing is, so what we've seen is that typically the way that government or people attract businesses, they go after the OEM. They try to attract the OEM to come to a province or a country, and then they hope the supply chain follows. I actually see completely the opposite. And I think in Canada, we have the opportunity to change that the other way. The difficult part is the tier 2, tier 3, the whole supply base, thousands of manufacturing businesses. We have a very hard time getting any spotlight at all because we don't, most of the time, have a well-known brand. We're not a VW and we're not a Harley Davidson, John Deere. People don't know who we are. If we can solve that and use the supply base and the strength that we have there, we will attract the OEM into the territory because, as Warren said, OEMs, they're much more critical about thinking about their supply chain strategy. COVID helped that because it helped expose the issues that they already had inherent in their business. And now they're working on trying to fix them. So coming at them with saying, hey, we have these 100,000 suppliers that do aerospace metals and plastics and wiring and electronics and automation and all this stuff within a radius of 100 kilometers. Most of the time that's unheard of in certain countries. That's how we attract the OEM. And don't stop. The government does it the other way around. They try to get the OEM, get them on the hook, bring them in, and then hope everything else kind of falls into place. I don't like that strategy.
Well, certainly today we started with the tier 2. We put a spotlight on it, and I hope that we do that more. So for on that note, I would say reach out to us, reach out to Accelerate. And Andrew McKinnon, who's on the line, and we'll circulate his contact after this webinar. He's just, assembling a task force, like a manufacturing task force for the EV supply chain. CME, we have our own EV working group committee. So if you're a member of CME, contact me. We all want to work together. We all want to assemble those ideas together and again, really shine that spotlight on all those companies that that can really be kind of the grassroots of the EV revolution. So we really need you to get involved and do this with us. But thank you for logging in today and giving us your time. Stay in touch, and everyone have a great day. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, David. Thank you, Warren.